levies that we are charging here, the levies that are accruing to the state from charges on the petroleum products, only the special petroleum tax really directly contributes to general government expenditure. Only that one. The remaining of the levies, as you can see, are largely earmarked for addressing the political sins of the past, such as paying for inefficiencies in the energy sector. And you can see the number of energy sector levies that we have there. Repaying road sector debts or funding single source contracts such as the sanitation levy has done in the past. So in effect, an otherwise good source of revenue for development has been consigned to satisfy the political settlements that we have in the country. Now, we have in the past indicated how even for the energy sector recovery levies that we've been paying, they've not been able to do the work that they are supposed to do, where we still have about, now the number is according to the minister designate, it's about $3 billion of debt. That shows you that even though we are paying, if we buy a liter, take energy debt recovery levy, energy fund levy, that's already 50 pesos, and the energy sector recovery levy, another 20. You are paying 70 pesos on every liter you buy at the pump to fix the energy sector issues. Yet, the debt has grown to about $3 billion today. So then the question is, what are we paying for? And I think that's a question that is on a lot of the minds of a lot of Ghanaians. And these are conversations that we are going to continue to have, because the energy sector debt has continued to grow beyond the capacity of the levies that we have, without any commensurate commitments to address it, right? And we all know, and from conversations we've had with all of you, that the ECG's under recovery is the major culprit of the debt accumulation, and it continues to grow with imminent indication of increased tax imposition on the public. So we have to fix that problem as well. Now to the matters that agitate the mind of us, and we hope that it would also agitate the minds of consumers of petroleum products. We see that between 2018 and 2024, the regulatory margins, which are the margins that are within the control of the MPA, have significantly increased. So the bust margin, the primary distribution margin, which the PDM, the fuel market margin, and the Unified Petroleum Price Fund, also known as the UPPF, have increased by 247%, 350%, and 429% respectively. And because there is the regulator, there is no accountability mechanism around it, consumers are burdened by these margins that are imposed by the regulator. And since the introduction of price deregulation in 2015, these margins have really acted as an unjust tax on the people without any sound economic justification for their existence. I mean, the original intent behind deregulation was to allow the market players to handle the distribution of petroleum products, while the MPA focuses solely on quality control and ensuring compliance to the standards in the market. However, this has generally not been the case. Instead, the MPA has transformed itself into a bloated procurement powerhouse, imposing unnecessary costs on consumers while failing to guarantee product quality. It is important to note that in a fully deregulated market, competition anchored by an effective regulator will drive efficiency, leading to better products at lower prices for consumers. But the opposite is what we are seeing here. However, the current system stifles competition, allowing politically connected businesses to thrive while ordinary Ghanaians bear the brunt of inflated prices. So we'll look at the various margins and see how they operate. Now, our focus will be on the PDM, but let me give a background to the arbitrariness in some of the margins. There are two of these margins that are known as the Unified Petroleum Price Fund, the UPPF, which is purposed for ensuring price parity of petroleum products wherever you purchase them. And the PDM, the primary distribution margin, is to facilitate the transportation of products from one depot to the other. I mean, one of the most glaring examples of the inefficiencies of Ghana's downstream petroleum sector is the cost of transporting products from depot to retail outlets. This point I'm about to make is very important and you should take note. On the average, it costs 1 cedi 16 pesos. That is about 7 cents to transport a liter of petroleum product to the tank of a consumer. That is using the UPPF and the PDM. Meanwhile, the average cost of freight and insurance per liter of the product from Europe to Ghana is about 5 cents. So it costs more for the market to deliver products to the retail outlets than it costs to bring the product from Europe to Ghana. Yes, that is the reality that we are facing here. And the transportation margins account for over 11% of the ex-refinery price of diesel or petrol based on CBOT's data. So this on average adds up to about 100 Ghana cedis to every tank filled, raising about 5 billion Ghana cedis in annual revenues into deep state slush funds controlled by state institutions without proper accountability. So what is our issue with the primary distribution margin? This margin was imposed to cover the cost of inter-depot transportation by bus. So from depot to depot, from Kumasi to Buipe, from Accra to Kumasi. Consumers pay 26 pesos on every liter of petrol for primary distribution. What is shocking is that this fee is charged regardless of whether the product passes through bus facilities or not. And it is important to also know that more than 50% of products distributed in Ghana are moved outside of bus facilities. Then raises the question about the justification for this margin that consumers are paying for. This arbitrarily imposed margin generates over 1.2 billion Ghana cedis annually, which goes to fund political contracting for transportation services, allowing bus to act as a lever for crony capitalism. Contracts for transporting products between depots are often awarded at inflated rates to politically connected individuals, many of whom own no trucks themselves, but rely on truck owners to execute the contracts. Truck owners pay about 7,000 cedis per truck to the contract owners to secure these deals. So the people that even get the contract, they don't have trucks. They get it and then they sell it to the people who have the trucks for 7,000 per truck. This system not only enriches a select few, but also imposes unnecessary cost burden on consumers who end up paying more for petroleum products. The PDM could significantly lower and eliminate the need for UPPF, which is the next one we'll look at, by building a robust pipeline network to ensure efficient fuel distribution. Interestingly, past investments in pipelines were sabotaged to sustain the tracking of products across the country. Now we move to the Uniform Petroleum Pricing Fund, which is the UPPF, which was originally created to ensure that petroleum prices remain uniform across the country, preventing regions closer to ports from paying cheaper prices than those further inland. That is why when you buy a liter of fuel in Accra for say 10 cedis and you get to Hamley, you buy it for 10 cedis as well. This fund is to ensure that that happens. I mean, in theory, this is meant to promote equity, right? There's a social equity thinking into this, the establishment of this fund, and to ensure that all Ghanaians, regardless of their location, had access to affordable fuel. However, the reality is that prices are often lower in remote regions than in major cities like Accra, highlighting the fact that there are other economic variables that influence the price of petroleum products besides transportation costs. We at ACEP have always questioned the necessity of maintaining price parity for fuel in today's market. Should residents of heavily congested urban areas like Accra be required to subsidize fuel costs for those in less populated regions? From an economic perspective, this seems unjust, as city dwellers already face higher cost of living and spend hours in traffic, literally burning a lot of fuel at short distances compared to less populated regions, where a liter of fuel could cover more kilometers. There is also little evidence to suggest that the absence of UPPF will significantly raise fuel prices in remote areas. Lower prices in the farther regions indicate that other factors such as market competition and local operating costs play a more critical role in determining fuel prices than transportation costs alone. This raises important questions about the underlying rationale for maintaining the UPPF, especially given that its original purpose of ensuring uniform fuel pricing may no longer hold as much relevance in the current market. The reality is that the political settlement considerations appear to be driving the persistence of the UPPF. The margin has been adjusted at government's discretion, particularly when global oil prices decline after a surge. For example, the UPPF, which was set at 22 pesos in 2018, has ballooned to 90 pesos per liter today, an increase of over 300% in a span of barely 5 years. This significant hike in the margin suggests that price adjustments are being made without adequate economic justification. A major issue, and this is also a very important point, with the UPPF lies in the lack of transparency and accountability for the nearly 5 billion Ghana cedis in annual revenue accrued from the levy. The discretionary increment of the levy has expanded its use to cover off-budget expenditures, such as fuel consumption for political appointees at the presidency, security services, sole source tracking services, and the Petroleum Hub Corporation. They all get their money from UPPF. So when you look at the actual cost of cutting the commodity, they are charging you 90 pesos now, but the actual cost is around 26 pesos per liter. So what is the other, the difference doing? It is funding fuel consumption for political appointees at the presidency, the security services, sole source tracking services, and the Petroleum Hub Corporation. These expenditures are not accounted for in the national budget, allowing the government to collect what amounts to a clandestine tax. So when government feels they need to raise some money that they feel they can't raise from the budget, they talk to the MP and say, okay, let's increase the UPPF by 3 pesos per liter and use that money to fund this activity that we want to. If the government genuinely needs to fund fuel consumption for official duties, it should be reflected in the official budget, not hidden behind the veil of the UPPF. This practice really erodes public trust and creates the illusion that taxes are lower than they truly are, when in fact, citizens are paying more through such secret taxes that are not accounted for in the budget. Then we come to the fuel marking margin. Consumers in Ghana pay 9 pesos per liter for the marking of petroleum products. This is a fee intended to ensure the authenticity and quality of fuel sold at retail outlets. So it's just a dye that is used to dye petroleum products for you to know this is diesel, this is petrol, and it's from Ghana. It's just a dye that they are dropping in the product. However, documents sourced from the NPA reveal that the contractor responsible for the marking process receives only about half of the over 400 million Ghana cedis in annual margin revenues collected from consumers through this sole source procurement arrangement. So we are raising close to 400 million Ghana cedis. And the actual cost, as per the documents that we've cited from NPA, suggests that the contractor is only receiving half of this. So where is the other half going to? This discrepancy raises significant concerns about the transparency of the procurement process and the use of the remaining funds collected from consumers. Between 2019 and December 2023, the sole source contract for fuel marking was renewed 5 times, each time for short durations ranging from 2 to 6 months. Such frequent renewals create a political incentive for NPA officials to ensure that the contractor remains responsive to political settlements. So they won't give you a long contract to do that. I mean, even holding the fact that it is just one person that has done the contract for all of these years, they will also not give you a long-term contract because they want to hold a short leash on you. 3 months, another 2 months, 1 month, then 4 months, so that when you do not respond to the demands of the political settlements, they can quickly just change you and bring in somebody else because they are not in a long-term commitment with you. The brief renewal periods may encourage a playing ball approach where political and personal interests take precedence over the efficiency and accountability of the margins. In addition to the concerns surrounding the procurement processes, the effectiveness of the marking scheme itself is questionable. Evidence from the MPA shows that the proprietary chemical agent used for fuel marking ends up in the hands of fuel smugglers, undermining the very purpose of the scheme. Moreover, there are reports of over-concentration of the chemical at depot where petroleum products are loaded, suggesting that adulteration may occur after the marking process, which further weakens the system's integrity. So at the point where, because the MPA sometimes goes around to inspect some of these things, at the point where the fuel marking agent is being, sometimes they over concentrate it and go and dilute it later to create more inefficiencies in the system. In essence, the protection that consumers are paying for is not being realized, as the fuel marking scheme has really failed to prevent fuel adulteration and smuggling effectively. Despite the clear evidence that the fuel marking scheme is not delivering value for consumers, there seems to be a political interest in maintaining the arrangement. The scheme serves as a tool for procurement power, enabling MPA officials to allocate lucrative contracts without the scrutiny that comes with competitive bidding. Additionally, the revenue generated from the fuel marking scheme provides extra funds that can be spent outside the national budget, offering further incentive for political actors to preserve the status quo. This practice not only undermines consumer protection, but also fosters a lack of accountability and transparency in the management of public resources. We take the final margin, which is the BOST margin. So besides the PDM, BOST receives 12 pesos per liter of every product we consumers purchase for the maintenance of BOST operations aimed principally at keeping strategic stock, a function that it has never performed. We have no evidence that BOST has ever kept strategic stock. Maybe they can come back to us and indicate the periods when they have. In recent years, the company has taken on a more commercial outlook, competing directly with private sector players in the importation and sale of petroleum products. This shift has raised concerns about BOST's continued receipt of these margins, which amounts to almost 600 million Ghana cedis annually, particularly since the company operates tax-free assets while competing with private businesses that pay tax. Currently, BOST controls about 20% of the petroleum import market through its Gold for Oil program, reinforcing its commercial outlook and a deviation from their core mandate of keeping strategic stocks. The points we are making here is that you are supposed to bring products and keep strategic stocks that OMCs can reach out to you when they have shortfalls and get the products from you. But now you are competing in the market with the OMCs, the BDCs, you are competing with all of them. Meanwhile, you are being subvented by a margin on the products beyond the usual margins that everybody gets for selling the product. So then what is the justification for continuously paying this margin when you have shifted away from your core responsibility of just keeping strategic stock to the extent that now 20% of petroleum product imports, you control that much of the market? There is no justification to continue keeping the margin on. The changing refinery landscape also further questions the necessity of maintaining boss margins, especially in a market where private sector players are capable of delivering the same services at lower cost. ACEP has argued that strategic stocks could be achieved through regulation by mandating bulk oil distribution companies to hold minimum stocks that meet the strategic stocks of the country. The point we are making here is that why not ask the BDCs to all hold a certain minimum reserve of the product that cumulatively will meet the reserve needs of the country? It's just like the way the Bank of Ghana asks banks to have certain capital reserves, minimum capital reserves. It's the same suggestion that we are having, so that we don't need boss to be there claiming margins, trading, and not delivering any value for the consumer. Again, incentives could be provided for international oil traders to store products in Ghana to create significant buffer to meet national supply security. Then there is the premix conundrum that we've had for some time now. The price stabilization and recovery levy was introduced as part of the Energy Sector Levies Act to create a financial buffer for the petroleum sector. So the job of that levy was essentially to stabilize petroleum prices and also provide subsidies for premix and residual fuel oil and mitigate under recoveries. Consumers in Ghana, we have paid over 3 billion Ghana cedis into the fund since its inception. However, only a portion of these funds have been directed towards the intended purpose of subsidizing premix fuel, with a large part remaining unaccounted for. At no point has the price stabilization levy been used to stabilize other fuels. The promised stabilization of petroleum prices for consumers has not materialized, nor have the buffers for under recoveries been sufficiently established. Somebody will ask, if this were working, we wouldn't need gold for oil, right? We are paying this levy and then they bring in gold for oil to also stabilize the price. So what is the money we are paying? What is it being used for? And this is largely as a result of the systemic issues associated with the distribution and use of subsidized fuel, which expose broader governance challenges and rendering the fund ineffective in achieving its core objective of stabilizing petroleum prices and subsidized premix fuel. We have done a lot of work on premix at ACEP and supported a lot of investigative journalists to really uncover what really happens. And we all know the stories about premix. An interesting thing that we see is that and the chart that is there, if you look at the original breakdown of premix fuel consumption between 2023 and the first quarter of 2024, it indicates that the northern and old Bono regions, where there is limited utility for the fuel, recorded the highest increase in consumption. So there is consumption of premix fuel for fishing more in the north than it is at the coastal areas. Yes. So the northern region between that period has increased, consumption has increased by over 300% and over 190% in the Bono region. Whereas the coastal, western, central, and greater Accra regions, where Ghana's landing beaches are concentrated, recorded fuel consumption growth of minus 4%. Actually, there was a decline in the western region by 4%, 21% in the central region, and 13% in the greater Accra region. So those here are consuming less fuel than those in the north. Then, in the beginning, when I showed the chart on the various margins, I showed the cylinder recirculation model margin, right? It is important to note that the promotion of LPG usage plays a major role in Ghana's energy transition goals. In fact, the energy transition framework is targeting about 70% rural LPG adoption by 2070. However, the rising cost of the products has discouraged LPG adoption among households. For instance, the MPA has reported a 12% drop in LPG consumption between 2021 and 2022, a significant contributor to the rising cost of LPG due to imposition of regulatory margins and charges, which account for approximately 12% of the cost per kilogram of the fuel. And I know all of us here, we buy LPG for our homes, apart from Kizito and Go, who use electric cookers in their home. We buy, and Michael is looking at me. We all buy gas, and we have noticed the aim of the cylinder recirculation model is to improve access to and ensure the safety of LPG through a system where end users exchange empty cylinders for pre-filled ones at designated bottling plants. I mean, I'm sure you have attended a lot of MPA stuff and they've explained it. Now, creates an assumption that the only hindrance to LPG consumption is the proximity of the commodity to end users, downplaying other important factors such as cost of products and the heavily socialized model of consumers filling at the pump and guaranteed of getting the amount of gas they are paying for. You should go to gas stations and see how people fight attendants that the gas is not up to. Yes, they want surety that the amount they are paying for is what they get in their cylinder. Again, the safety promise of the CRM is questionable, considering that most of LPG-related accidents happen at the household level than at refueling stations. Some of the accidents recorded at the LPG refueling stations are largely due to a departure from the safety protocols set out by the regulator, such as the use of defective valves. The fundamental question for the regulator is whether there are not enough regulatory instruments to avert some of the accidents being recorded in the existing model. If the answer is no, then the CRM is prone to similar regulatory failures at the refuel plants and BRVs that are meant to transport LPGs across the country. So you're only transferring the safety concerns from the filling station to the homes of the people. Currently, it requires about 4 trucks to transport filled cylinders of gas equivalent to gas volumes that would have been transported by one BRV, one bulk road vehicle, creating transportation costs that is not accounted for in the CRM. It is assumed that the UPPF will offset this extra cost, but this will require an increase in the UPPF that we are already complaining about, which will be borne directly by the end users or a cross subsidy on other petroleum products. The sustainability of the CRM is also hinged on the $80 per ton margin charged irrespective of whether the LPG is purchased through the CRM or the conventional model, right? So right now we have 2 systems running. The one you go to the pump and get, and the one through the CRM. but we are charging the margin across board. So for consumers that are consuming by taking their own cylinders to go and purchase the products, they are paying for a service that they are not enjoying, right? So that inequity in the system is something that is has to be looked at. Based on the 2024 consumption data, this margin, $80 per ton margin, generates about $27 million annually, translating to about 381 million Ghana cedis. To cater for the investment cost of implementing a program, such as purchasing the cylinders for the CRM. Despite this huge subsidy, the NPA seeks to implement other measures to curtail the importation of cylinders with a long-term goal of killing businesses in the existing model. The $80 margin raises accountability concerns as the consumer is not aware of how long this margin will be collected. We are told that the margin is to allow investments into the model, getting the plants to set up, getting the manufacture of the cylinders. But we don't know what the sunset of that, at what point does the investment in setting up the model end? It is material to note that without the CRM model, this annual subsidy of nearly 400 million Ghana cedis could be availed to government as tax revenue for development purposes, because we are already paying anyways. So it could be given to government to fix its gaping holes in the fiscal space. With all these lingering questions, the World Bank continues to fund public education on a model that seeks to collapse over 600 local businesses in favor of a few anointed businesses by the NPA. I am told that currently only 4 plants have been licensed to bottle the products. Yes. So, having presented all of these things, let's go through a summary of the things that I've said. One, that out of the over 9.7 billion of annual petroleum taxes, only the special petroleum tax, which is about 2.4 billion, provides unencumbered resources for development efforts. That's what goes directly to government for effort. The rest are earmarked for energy sector and road sector debt servicing and paying for the inefficiencies that we have within the space. Regulatory margins such as the bus margin, primary distribution margin, unified petroleum price fund, and the cylinder recirculation model margin cumulatively generates about 7.6 billion Ghana cedis annually spent by BOST and the NPA on downstream operations. And I've indicated what the challenges we have with that. Between 2019 and 2024, regulatory margins such as the BOST margin and all of that have increased by 300, 247, 350, and 429% respectively. That is how much the burden on consumers is growing year on year. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop if we don't collectively demand a stop to it. So consumers also pay more. And this point is very important to me. Consumers pay more for the products to leave the depot to their retail outlets than they pay for the product to leave Europe to Ghana. We pay 7 cents per liter for depot to retail distribution, significantly higher than the average freight and insurance cost, which is 5 cents per liter for diesel from Europe to Ghana. Again, the PDM, which is intended to cover the cost of depot-to-depot transportation by bus, is levied regardless of whether BOS facilities are utilized. And this is particularly disingenuous, given that over 50% of petroleum products bypass BOS altogether. Out of the over 780 million annual revenues from the price stabilization and recovery levy, a portion goes to subsidize premium fuel. I should say a significant portion, the bigger portion. The only time I remember that the price stabilization levy was used to influence petroleum prices was a time when it was zero rated for a point. I think around 2022, it was zero rated for a number of months, which meant that we were not paying for it. That was the only time. The rest goes to premix, and we are all witnesses to what happens within the premix space, unaccounted for. Again, for an entity that is tasked with building strategic reserve, BOS now controls about 20% of the petroleum import market through the government's Gold for Oil program, making it deviate from its core mandate. And this commercial shift really questions BOS continuous receipt of regulatory margins. 12 pesos per liter we give to BOS to compete with the private sector that builds and maintains their own infrastructure. Furthermore, over 400 million Ghana cedis in annual revenues is generated through the fuel market margin intended to guarantee the authenticity of fuel. However, the proliferation of proprietary marking chemical in the market undermines the purpose of charging the fuel marking margin. People bring in products from other places and they have access to the chemical agents for the fuel marking, and they blend it into the market. So then why are we paying for it? The CRM receives an annual subsidy of nearly 400 million Ghana cedis through the $80 per ton margin on all LPG consumed, irrespective of whether the consumption is made through the CRM or the conventional model, to subsidize the CRM to make it competitive against the over 600 businesses in the existing model. Now, our recommendations. We are asking that all these margins and margins and margins, given our work, which shows that there is no justification in the current market for them. We are already paying, and it will be a good source of revenue to government. So government should convert all of them into tax revenues and redirect those revenues towards development projects. And they have to be specific on what things. Yesterday I was hearing the money that they seized from the petroleum minister in Nigeria. They are going to use it for rural electrification, right? With projects attached to it. Those are some of the things that we want these margins to be converted to. Convert them to tax that can finance development, right? And this will free up about 6.3 billion Ghana cedis in annual revenue to fund critical infrastructure and social programs, right? How much are we raising from free e-levy? Again, about 2.5 billion or 3 billion. Yeah, so we should do that. The market we operate now shows that we do not need BOS. Or if we continue to have BOS, then we should commercialize it and list it on the stock exchange. This will ensure transparency and accountability in BOS operations while reducing the burden on consumers. That's another 12 pesos kicked out of the payment. Thirdly, we have to end the premix subsidy. All investigations on premix operations in Ghana shows that the final consumers are not getting the product at the price that we are paying the subsidy for. There are some people that have allocated the product among themselves and sell above the subsidized rate. So if the people who are supposed to get a product are not getting it at the rate we want them to get it because of social equity concerns, then why do we still keep having it? We should cancel it, right? If we are so intent, then we suggest that direct financial support, cash transfers, should be provided to fisher folk directly to purchase their fuel rather than maintaining an outdated and corrupt subsidy program. Other innovative ideas such as solar-powered fishing, and I hear it is being piloted in some places where they are using solar-powered outboard motors, will help to significantly reduce the reliance on premix and ensure that the subsidy is cancelled. Government should also prioritize addressing the energy sector debts in the short to medium term to free up revenues for development purposes. About 9.7 billion Ghana cedis worth of levies are earmarked largely for energy sector and road sector debt services. So it's not even it doesn't even have to do with anything happening in the petroleum sector. We are just taking money from consumers to go and shore up some inefficiencies. And work we've done also indicates that the ESLA is even now not paying for the debts. It's actually paying the coupons on the bond that was raised to retire the earlier debt. And because we've not been able to stem the debt accumulation over time, the new debt have accrued, and the ESLA, even though we are collecting the levies, is no longer paying for the debt that we have now. That is why we have accumulated up to $3 billion in debt within the sector. So as important as possible, we have to quickly fix the energy sector problems to free up consumers from paying all of these monies into a leaky basket. Again, the NPA should build regulatory capacity to facilitate healthy competition in the downstream petroleum sector and detect anti-competitive behavior. This will revert the current trend of the NPA's wholesale intervention in product pricing and control of downstream transactions and procurement of services in a deregulated market. What we are asking is that the NPA should only be limited to two things. Should be limited to the availability, regulating the availability of the product in the market, and also ensuring that the standards of the products are met, ensuring compliance to the standards. Those are the only two things we are requiring from NPA. Not to be dabbling into all manner of things. In recent times, I hear they even want to pay truck drivers. They've developed a policy to pay truck. All those things are not regulatory functions. They are just a way the regulator is finding to insert itself into the value chain to be able to milk it. And we strongly oppose that. Finally, the NPA should focus on tracking the quality and quantity of fuel delivery into the country and at the pump. This will eliminate the need for revenue assurance contracts and cumbersome fuel tracking systems by the NPA. So, ladies and gentlemen and friends of the media, this is what we have promised you that we were going to deliver to you. And at this point, I will take a few questions, and then we'll be out of here. Okay, is that? So I'll take like 3 questions first.
Mine is okay. The microphone won't come, but that's fine. Just to clarify something in terms of the now the product control or import by BOST. I think that it arose as a result of the good for oil policy.
Yeah.
And that policy was also introduced at the time the country fixed FX issues and then fuel shortages in the country. Now, given all the happenings, would you say we should phase out that policy, the gold for oil policy? Because if we are able to do that, that takes away the fact that boss is trying to assert itself as a controller of the product that comes into the country. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will say that we have always maintained that that policy will not meet its objective when it was proposed. And it has actually not. It was intended to do two things: stabilize the price of petroleum products and also influence the FX. But within the period that it has been implemented, have we seen petroleum prices stable? We have not, right? We have a price stabilization levy, which is supposed to stabilize petrol. Where is that money coming from? And that is assured money that is coming, right? And we are hopeful that once there is more transparency on the happenings of the gold for, we'll see how much losses have been created due to entities that are not designed for trading, assuming trading responsibilities and the losses that they've made within the space. And those are things that we are going to focus on within the course of this year.
My name is Emmanuel Saki. I work with Top TV, Top Radio. As a policy think tank, do you support the call by the energy minister to, one, privatize ECG, two, merge GRICO and VRA in reducing the energy sector debt?
I think anybody that has interfaced with ACEP over the past how many years knows ACEP's position on this matter. ACEP has always maintained that government has shown that it cannot reform itself. ECG has also shown that it cannot be reformed by government. So we have always called for some form of private sector participation in the operation and management of ECG. Right? That is what we have always called for, because that is where the bigger chunk of the problem, for which we have to pay petroleum levies, 9.7 billion. That is outside the $1.5 billion government has to pay every year for under recoveries in the energy sector. So you see that we are being overtaxed as a people. On petroleum products, we are paying for inefficiencies. In the budget, we are being deprived of welfare spending because of inefficiencies in the energy sector. So we have always maintained that position. And in the coming days, as the conversations evolve on what model we should adopt, we'll share our thoughts on what should be done as government considers that. And then the second bit about the merger, I have not seen any proper justification for the merger. So I'm not able to comment on whether it's I mean, I feel it's somebody's idea that we should do it. But so far, nobody has given any reason why that has to be done. At best, what we are doing is we are just bringing together two inefficient entities. We are not going to cut down costs. The workers will be merged together. Nobody is going to sack anybody. We rationalize anybody. They are all government entities. Who are you going to sack? The only thing is that they only have one CEO, finish. So until we see a proper justification, economic, technical justification for the merger, it's difficult for us to comment on.
Okay, just a follow-up. Per your earlier infographics, will you say that the ESLA funds was not used for its main purpose that led to the increase in energy debt?
Oh, the ESLA was used for what it was supposed to be used for. But we wanted it to be done quickly. And it was done without fixing the fundamental issue, which is the debt accumulation in the sector. So at the time, it was able to pay off all the legacy debts that we had, the toll debt and all of those things. It paid. But because the leakage is still there, right? Something is leaking and it has caused a puddle here. Then you go and carry rocks and fill the puddle and put quota on it, forgetting that the leakage is still there. That's why we have, that's how we have potholes on some of our roads. You don't fix the fundamental issue, it will still come up. So because the debt accumulation persisted over the period, we now see that the bond that was raised to pay those legacy debts, now we have to use receipts from now to service those bonds. So what do we use to pay for that? If the debt accumulation has stopped, we won't be having energy debt conversation today. Yeah. I think, okay.
While there is not any official position or justification for the measure, for example, I've heard the IPP boss, IPP's boss, say Dr.
The chamber.
The chamber, yes. Say, for instance, that because they operate as independent, entities, that is why some of these inefficiencies are there. And he makes the argument that a measure would streamline, operations and cut costs, as well as strengthen service delivery through unified management and expanded resources. This is the argument he makes, and which ties or feed into perhaps the broader government thinking that there has to be a measure. So how do you, just oppose that with the position you hold?
Unfortunately, I'm unable to comment on that because he's not the one who took the bill to Parliament. It is only the justification provided by the one who is proposing it that we have to interrogate. That is his opinion on the matter, and it continues to be that. So, yeah. Wait. You raised your hand.
Yeah. So in your earlier submission, you mentioned that some of the levies imposed on petroleum products are sanctioned by Parliament. On hindsight, do you think some of the margins also, the margins that the NPA is able to impose on petroleum products, do you think that should also be subjected to, parliamentary approval? And also, a second question would be that now we have a new minister designate. Likely, we are also going to have a new CEO for the NPA. What should be their immediate priorities given the concerns you have raised?
In actual fact, if you look at my recommendations, we don't want NPA to be receiving any margin. We are asking that those margins be converted to tax handles within the control of government, that those revenues accrue to government to be used for development purposes. Because NPA is already paid to do its work. Implicit in the cost of the product, there is money for it to do its work. So we don't want NPA to be in the business of collecting money for transportation, collecting money for this purpose of the product. No, stick to ensuring there is enough products in the country and there is the quality of the product can be guaranteed. That is what NPA should be. Those are its regulatory functions. All other things are just lending itself to the political settlement to be used to siphon money off the pockets of consumers. And then the second question, I mean, these things, the recommendations are really things that they should be focused on. How do we rationalize the margins, for example, to ensure that they become tax handles? Some of the issues that we have raised, the subsidy program, which has become a cash cow for some political people. How do we put an end to it? So the recommendations really are things that the new minister and the CEO of the NPA should be focused on when it comes to downstream petroleum revenues. I hope I have.
My question is, we understand that taxes and levies make up 1% of the total cost.
About 23%.
23%, okay.
makes about 23%. The other 70-something% is largely because of the FX.
Yes.
So why aren't you focusing on policies or recommendations towards that? Because really, if the CD to the dollar will say 5 cedis, fuel prices could sell for just about 5 cedis per liter at the pumps. So wouldn't you say that your research should be focusing on that rather than the under 23% in this case that you are even calling for just a renaming of some of them or reassigning? Question one. Number two, the energy sector debt. What would be your policy recommendations to begin to address them? Because we've heard the president show commitments to the IPPs to get them to keep the lights on, but that is not enough. How do we realistically, under such a constrained fiscal environment, begin to address the debts? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you make a valid point about, and when I started my presentation, I did indicate that taxing petroleum products is not a new thing. In fact, in other jurisdictions, it's actually higher than what we pay here. Our concern has been that having paid, what is the money being used for? That is where we are coming from. So we admit that there are other factors that contribute to how much we pay for petroleum products. I mean, it's actually just two things: a function of the FX and also taxes and levies on the product. So having paid, what is the money used for? That is where we accountability actors come in to interrogate what I use. I use it for the purpose. Are the people getting value for money? So that is the angle that we are coming from. Now, on the energy sector debts, we have held numerous forums to discuss this, and I'm happy that there appears to be a consensus on where the problem is coming from. In the past, we've all been ducking around the problem, but now there appears to be a consensus. The problem is from the distribution end of the value chain. That is where the leakages are. If you have a distribution entity that is only collecting about 43% of the revenues that is supposed to collect on the average every month, that is a big problem that you have on your hands. How do we ensure that they are able to collect? Mind you that there is a regulator that gives benchmarks for such rates, collection rates, losses, and all of those things. Year in, year out, these utilities continue not to meet the requirements, and nothing is being done to them because they are all what government entities. In fact, last year, we saw how the utility was fighting its regulator, even in the public, right? That is why we have come to the conclusion that government has shown it cannot reform itself. It cannot reform itself because there's no accountability for the decisions within the space. If ECG procures some meters to the tune of $40 million and keeps in some warehouse and it gets bad, or it doesn't go and do factory acceptance tests and the meters are brought in and they are not fit for purpose, who is held accountable for those losses? Those losses are eventually passed on into the tariffs that we pay, because there is a portion to recover the losses that they are making. If people are stealing power, where is the incentive to chase the people stealing power? The people owing for power consumed, where is the incentive to chase them? There's no accountability within the space because everybody feels that they are government entities, they are appointed by government, so they are only accountable to the appointing authority. That is why we feel that, and we strongly support the position that for the management and operation of ECG, we should consider bringing in a private entity where we can set realistic targets over time for them to achieve. And the regulator now is in a position to regulate them and ensure that they meet the requirements that are being set.
The ECG boss is on record to have said that one of the challenges with the sector is the fact that power is bought in dollars and sold in cedis. So there will always be the currency loss bit to it. According to him, this will always remain a loophole, even when you privatize ECG. What's your response to that?
So every quarter, the PRC comes to adjust tariffs. And in the past 2 years, when they have done that consistently, all the adjustments have been on the basis of forex adjustments to recover the losses from the previous period, right? So that is accounted for. The problem is you are not collecting what you are supposed to collect. It doesn't matter whether it is in cedis or it is in dollars. That loss is always accounted for when there is an adjustment in the tariff. And we do the adjustment on a quarterly basis, right? And the tariff always is set and is put in the FX is set and put in the tariff that we pay, right? So that argument really, for me, does not hold. The important thing is that you are supposed to collect revenues and you are only doing about 43% on an annual basis, which is not good enough. When you collect 100% of your revenues and they are still under recoveries as a result of FX challenges, then we can have that conversation. I think I'll take no more questions. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for coming. I hope that this year we'll have a fruitful relationship with you. Those who have been fighting me, stop fighting me. Those who owe me Christmas things, I've mentioned some names. They shouldn't pretend they are not seeing me. I hope to see you more this year. This year, I've decided to be very friendly to the media. Because of that, last week, we had not resumed last week, but when people call me, I speak to them.